Doing today? Yeah, good to see you. I love that song. I don't know about you. I was raised singing that song, and it's just always a beautiful reminder that the God who is faithful is always available to you. So I don't know what this week has been like for you. I don't know what you bring into this room or what you're carrying as you're tuning in and worshiping with us online, but whatever it is welcomed and it is loved by the God of the universe because you are loved by the God of the universe. So I'm so glad that you're here today. My name's Kurt. I'm one of the pastors here at Restoration, and thanks for joining us. If you are a middle schooler, we'd love to dismiss you at this time to your small group back in the back with Miss Lena. You guys are wrapping up your series back there, so thanks for hanging with us so far, but you're going to have way more fun back there with her, I promise. But we're glad that you're here in the room. We are continuing and wrapping up as well our series called Praying Through, as Julie mentioned earlier, and it's been a powerful space to just kind of go through piece by piece all that it means to have a relational connection with God. I don't know about you, there's lots of spaces in life, lots of spaces in our spiritual journey where we often can make things more complicated than they need to be. My son got a cookbook in his book fair at the end of the year earlier, and he comes back and goes, "Dad, I want to make this recipe." And of course, my thought is like the mess I'm going to have to clean up after our kid cooks in the kitchen. But I'm like, "Great, what is it?" And he tells me it's so cool and has this cool long name. And then I read the instructions, and it's scrambled eggs with salt and pepper. But he's stoked on it. I'm like, "You can do that. That's great, no problem." And I was thinking about how we come to the conversation around prayer. So often we like to make it feel really, really big when the ingredients to it are actually quite simple. And we began this series asking the question, like, is it God that makes prayer difficult, or is it us? And so hopefully, if you've been tracking along with us at all throughout this series, you have found some easier handholds to perhaps the most important connection and opportunity that you have in your spiritual journey is to actually connect directly to God. That you have the invitation, the opportunity, and the openness, if you want to take it, to actually speak with regularly the God of the universe. And so just to kind of give us a quick overview, we talked about how Jesus made it so clear that as simple and as regular as we may have heard the Lord's Prayer to be in our time, it was brand new revolutionary information to the first followers of Jesus that they could actually speak directly to God. That up until then, they had thought that they had to go through some sort of mediator, some person or some activity in order to get a connection to God. And Jesus says, actually, no, you, as small as you may feel, have a connection to the divine power of the universe, and you can speak to him as you would to your earthly parents. We talked about how there's actually this practice of actually stepping into spaces of silence and stillness amidst our very busy and very distracted, oriented lives that can actually bring stillness to our souls so that we actually hear from God. And then we explored, how do we actually hear from the Spirit of God? What does it look like for God to actually talk back to us? And then last week, we explored the pattern and the practice of how we live in a space of confession. We actually open our souls up to more of God. That when we try to manage the things in our life where we've missed it, where we feel guilt, where we've sinned, where we've missed the mark, when we try to manage that, it actually does damage to our soul. So there's this invitation to a practice of confession, that it doesn't have to be laced with fear or posturing, but it's actually this normal everyday occurrence, just like you would with a loved one saying, "Hey, I blew it, and I want to be restored, I want to come back, and I want another chance," and that God is always faithful, just as we sang about, to offer that. And then today, we're going to look at what does it look like to actually pray for and believe the God of the universe, this big, all-powerful, creative God that we have access to actually believe God for big things. What does it look like to actually stretch our faith and to step in to trust in God, not just for the everyday, ordinary things in our life, although God cares about those things as well, but that actually prayer can be a powerful way, a powerful practice for us to actually stretch and grow our faith based on the things that we are willing to pray for and believe God for. And we talked about from the very beginning that prayer is not something to be perfected. And so I just want to remind us of that, especially as we step into this last conversation, is that prayer is not something to be perfected. And especially we start talking about how do we believe God for big things, how we stretch our faith and pray for important things, pray for healing, pray for financial provision, pray for miracles, pray for revival, pray for things that we don't know how they're going to happen. It is important to remember that it is not motivated by or even controlled by our ability to do it right, but it is more impacted by the posture we have in front of a God who is always willing to listen and to move and to grow us in the process. That prayer never can be perfected, but it can always be practiced. And this is a ritual and a rhythm that we can get into where it's like, hey, this is just one more round of practice in something new. I was listening to a podcast earlier this week where they were talking about communication. And it was around like relational communication, and they had this couple on the podcast where one of the people in the couple they were interviewing used to be a pretty well-known Olympic gymnast who had everything going for her, everything about her career up to that point going into the Olympics. She was the perhaps guaranteed winner of the all-around. If you had voted who's going to take it, it was going to be Shawn Johnson. And everything about her career had gone to that point. It was like a surprise. We were living in the Midwest at the time. She was from the Midwest, so it was like, I had a skin in the game. It was basically, it was because of me that she was on the way to the Olympics. And so I was very invested. Some of you may know that Katie grew up as a competitive gymnast. So we were watching, long before she even made the team, we were watching her. And she gets to the Olympics, and things go really, really well, but they just don't go as well as she thought. And things get to the final all-around, and she does not win the gold medal. And it's this moment that they were talking about it in conversation around her marriage with this podcast host about how that idea as a gymnast, as a competitive athlete, that I would just iterate over and 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 over. You get it like ad nauseum, right? Just how many times I would practice something new, practice something that I thought I had perfected. I would keep iterating, keep practicing that thing in order to get absolutely perfect for the competition. Because that mindset has helped us so much in our relationship. That every time we have this same fight about this same thing, it's like, great, this is just another practice. This is just another iteration. This isn't final. This isn't the end. This is practice. And I was thinking about that idea. Not only is that great advice for relationships, but as it comes to prayer, which is a relational practice with God, that things can be practiced over and over and over again. Practicing confession, practicing hearing from God, practicing being still, because we're not going to get it right the first time. At least I certainly have not. And so as we lean into this conversation today around what are you believing God for that feels big to you, my guess is if we were to think about it for any length of time, there is something that would come to your mind that either you have been praying for a really, really long time for God to come through, or something that you're praying for that feels bigger than you. You're like, I don't know how this is going to happen, so maybe prayer is the only thing I have for it. Or if you're honest, if I'm honest, sometimes there are things that feel so big in our life that I actually don't pray about them. They feel so big that I just feel stuck or paralyzed, and I don't even engage in prayer with God around them. And the question I want us to ask today, if God were to show up on Monday in your morning time, you're getting ready for work, you're getting ready for school, and he goes, all right, God shows up and says, you got 60 seconds. What do you want? How would you respond to that? How would you respond to that direct of a question? Would there be something in your mind that you would be able to be honest with God about that is something that you want? What would you say in that scenario? Because we see throughout the scriptures that Jesus actually says that multiple times to people. He goes, what do you want? And sometimes their responses to me feel like, that's what you came up with? like you have the God of the universe asking you, what do you want? And you said, where are you going? Like you could have figured that out on your own, bro. Just keep walking, right? But what would it be for you? What would it be for me? If God were to show up and say, what do you want? What would you say? How would you respond? Would it be something financial? God, I need some provision. I need some new money. I need a new job. Maybe it's I need you to take care of the old money that I spent when I wasn't thinking, and so the credit card debt or the student loans, could those just disappear? That'd be awesome, right? Or maybe it's something with your health. God, I can't do anything about this. I've tried all the things, and yet this is still ailing me. I would need some healing, or I need some healing for someone else that I care about. they're going through something difficult. Maybe it's a relational space. Like, God, I want this relationship to be healed, and it's just dragging me down. Or God, I want a relationship. I haven't had a relationship, and I crave one. I don't know what it is for you, but if God were to ask you, what do you want? What would you say? I think that's where we have to start, right? Is even just putting words to what am I actually willing to believe God for, to ask God for, to trust God for, even if it feels big and audacious and out of my grasp. Because if I'm honest, most of the time when I ask God for things, I would like to ask God for things that I also can be God's backup plan if he decides not to come through. Like, for real. Like, I'm going to ask God for something that way I can do it and make sure it happens so that, I don't lose faith in God. Like, just to be honest. And so what happens when I do that is I continue to not only keep God small in my own imagination, but that prayer becomes a task list that is stressful, not restful, but that actually is more about me and the how it's going to happen than the who I'm actually talking to. And the good news is that I'm not the first person to experience that. If that resonates with you, you are not the first person to experience that posture around communication with God has actually been happening for a long, long time. And so how beautifully human, right? Totally cool, totally great. And yet there is an invitation that God has for us to actually lean into a bigger and better story as we believe God for things that seem outside of our reach, outside of our ability to make happen on our own, where we actually have to take a faith risk and actually believe for something that will require trust and faith. And so to give us some context for that and to kind of guide us today, I'd love to invite you to turn to Exodus chapter 33. We're going to study a moment where Moses is talking to God. And so there's a blue Bible in the seat back pocket in front of you if you want to grab that one. It's on page 56 in this blue Bible. If you got it on your phone or you brought your own, we're going to Exodus 33, starting in verse 12. As you're turning there, just to give you some context, Moses has freed the Israelite people from slavery in Egypt. So the people of God have left captivity after hundreds and hundreds of years. They've seen God do some incredible things in that process. You've probably seen the movie, either animated or Charlton Heston, either way, right? You've seen all that went down, and so they have seen God do some pretty incredible things as God has led them out of Egypt, and God has told them over and over again, I'm leading you to a promised land. It's going to be amazing. You're actually going to have a place of your own after being enslaved and now being refugees for hundreds and hundreds of years. And Moses is having this prayerful conversation with God. And in Exodus 33, in the beginning of that chapter, in verse 4, it talks about how Moses and God had this friendship, that their conversations, their prayers, their relationship was how you would speak to a friend, both casual and confrontational. And so Moses has kind of let God have it a little bit because he's like, I thought we would be there by now. Like, he's a kid in the back of the minivan on a road trip. Like, that's his mode with God right now, right? And so finally it says, one day Moses said to the Lord, this is verse 12, you have been telling me, take these people up to the promised land. God, I did what you asked me to do, but you haven't told me who you will send with me. You have told me, I know you by name, and I look favorably on you. And if that's true, that you look favorably on me, let me know your ways so I may understand you more fully and continue to enjoy your favor. And remember that this nation is your own people, right? Like, so Moses is saying, hey, God, you've told me what to do, but I would really love the how. Like, you told me what's going to happen, but I would love the GPS directions. Like, you've told me where to go, but I don't know the road trip map, and I don't know where to stop, and where do we get off for bathroom breaks, and do we have enough snacks? And, like he's doing all the things that you and I do in every moment of our life when God is leading us somewhere. Well, we go, great. Love that for you. Thanks for telling me what's in the future. I'm going to trust you. Would love to know how. Can we fill in the gaps? You've given me A and Z, but there's 24 letters in the alphabet in between. Like, any of those would be helpful at this point, right? And this is the posture that Moses comes into this conversation with God with. And I find it so refreshing because it would be a real bummer for my spiritual journey if the stories of the heroes of the faith contained in the scriptures were just like they asked God, they trusted it, and it happened, no problem, no question. Get there faster, Kurt. That would be really frustrating. And so I love that this story is included because we get to see Moses being very honest with God about how this is going down in his perception and the things that he is wanting from God. So he lets God in on his desire. He goes, this is what I want. It's very clear. And notice the Lord's response. It says, the Lord replied, I will personally go with you, Moses, and I will give you rest because you seem to be a little wound up. Everything will be fine for you. Notice how God speaks not just to what Moses asks for, but to the thing that Moses needs that is buried underneath all of his stress and requests. He says, yeah, I will go with you, and I will give you rest, and everything will be fine for you. And again, remember the context. For hundreds of years, the people have been craving the fulfillment of the promise of a promised land. That's all they've ever wanted. And Moses has been tapped by God to be the one to provide that for these people. Imagine the arrogance he could hold. Imagine all that stuff. And yet he's showing up vulnerably. And then notice what he says in response to God's promise to be with him. It says, Moses said, if you don't go personally with us, if, God, I know where you're taking me. I know why this is important. I know what you've done so far. But if you don't personally go with us, don't make us leave this place. Don't make us keep going. And he has this moment of breakthrough where he's like, God, no matter what you've promised, I actually want to make sure that I'm doing what you asked. No matter what I think the outcome is supposed to look like, no matter where I think I'm supposed to go, no matter what I believe might be best for the people that I'm in charge of leading, in this moment, Moses says, I just want to make sure I'm going with you. But then he kind of drops back into his humanity, as we all do, right? As I do, as you do. But how will anyone know that you look favorably on me? All of a sudden, my eyes are on God, then all of a sudden I just see everybody else all of a sudden, right? This is totally normal. And he goes, how will everyone else know that you look favorably on me and on your people, if you don't go with us? So now he's asked for the thing, and he's made this declaration, but now he's putting in some insurance. Really, God, we got to make sure, because this is actually good for you, right? If you were to come with us, so thanks so much, right? If you don't go with us, for your presence among us sets your people and me apart from all the other people on the earth. And the Lord replied, which I just imagine a deep breath and a sigh from God in this moment. I don't know why. Just I will indeed do what you have asked, for I look favorably on you, and I know you by name. It's chill, bro. Baby, chill, right? And then Moses responds, and I think this last request is so powerful because it's a reminder of what we actually need. Whether Moses knew it or not, what he needed was the reassurance that God was with him. Yes, there were things he had to do and places he had to get to and people he had to lead and problems he had to solve along the way. And he could have prayed for any and all of those things. And throughout the rest of the story, we see very honest, very vulnerable, very direct prayers from Moses. He is a masterclass in relational connection with God. And yet in this moment, he's all I need to know is that you're with me. So Moses responded and said, then show me your glorious presence. If you're coming with me, I just need a little assurance along the way. I don't know if you ever been there? You ever been there where God, I think I know I'm doing what you want. I asked for this and you've come through, but now it's been 45 seconds and I haven't heard from you and I'd like a little more assurance again. You've ever had that moment where you've tried to figure something out, you've prayed for something for so long, and it just hasn't felt like anything's moved at all. You haven't found traction. You've just gotten no after no after no matter how many LinkedIn posts you made or jobs you applied for or how many people you asked out. They just got no after no, and you're just what am I supposed to do with this? And what Moses gets to is he gets to this incredibly valuable place that I think is an invitation for you and for me as it relates to our prayers, especially when we're trusting God for big things, when we're doing what God has asked us to do, when we feel out on the edge, is he says, God, I just want more of your glorious presence. That faithfulness we just sang about, the goodness we just sang about, your presence in my life, the provision and all the stuff that's going to happen in the future is fine. I'll get there, but right now what I need is you. I need evidence that you're with me. And the question that it begs, I think, for me and maybe for you in this story that might be powerful for you to ask this morning is when you pray, do you want more from God or do you want more of God? Like, do I want more from God? Or if I'm honest, do I just want more of God in my life? That Moses says, if you don't personally go with us, I'm good skipping the promised land. Like if you're not there, if you're not in it, I don't want it. And what's powerful to realize is as you follow the line of the life of Moses, at the end of his story, he actually lived into this prayer not just as a fictitious idea or a faith-filled fairy tale, but that actually became his story. That Moses actually never makes it to the promised land. He sees it in the distance. He leads the people all the way to the doorstep of God's fulfillment of the promise. And he says, I've done my job, I'm good. And at the end of Deuteronomy, the writer of Deuteronomy, reflecting back on Moses' life, says, Moses died happy, for he had lived face to face with God. That Moses actually never got the thing that God had invited him to lead people to. As a leader, that's a very frustrating story. I don't like sitting in it for very long. But that's Moses' reality. And yet, as we see in the Lord's promise here in Exodus 33, I will indeed do what you ask, for I look favorably on you, and I know you by name. I wonder what would shift in your story. No matter what you think about God or how you would define yourself as a follower of Jesus, I wonder what would shift in your life, in your prayers, in how you experience the things that occur to you right now as challenging or big or overwhelming, or the things that feel very ordinary, like I can't bother God with that. Like what would shift in your life if you knew that God's response to Moses is the same one he offers to you? That I look favorably on you. I am with you, and I know you by name. That thing you're worried about, I care about it because I know you by name. That thing you're going after that feels crazy, but for whatever reason you just can't get out of your head, I'm with you as you pursue that, as you climb that mountain, as you take that risk, as you go for it yet again after being hurt, because I know you by name. The thing that bothers you that you wish would get out of your life, God says, I care about that, and I want to transform you in it because I know you by name. The shame you feel and the wondering if God even loves you at all because of how things have gone in the past or what others have said to you, God says, I look favorably on you, and I know you by name. And no matter all the things that you think are reasons for me to keep a distance from you, that's not true to God, because he is with you. But the question is, do I want more from God, if it's just like a genie in the bottle transactional relationship, or do I want more of God in my life? That no matter what I want God to fulfill, the request or the promises that I'm holding, if he's with me, is that enough for me? This moment is reflected in another moment in the lives of the first followers of Jesus. So if you want to flip way over to Matthew 17 in your Bible, in the blue Bible, it's on page 589. And Jesus is sending out his first followers. And he has just told them, the verse that actually leads to the mission statement of this church of empowering all people to love and follow Jesus, where he says, if you love and follow me, you will actually not only do the same things that I've done, but even greater things. And so he sends his first followers out to do the things, to heal the sick, to cast out demons, to provide for people, to teach people about the love of God, to intersect with their normal, very lives, and say God is writing a bigger story. And there's this moment in Matthew 17 where back then they believed that when people had unexplained medical issues, they would call them demons, right? And whether or not you believe in that or not, it'd be fine for this story. But for whatever reason, they were lovingly trying to heal this young boy who they felt was possessed by a demon, and they couldn't do it. And so they bring the boy to Jesus, like, hey, you know what? We got to go see the manager, right? We can't do this on our own. We got to bring it to high levels of leadership. And they bring the boy to Jesus, and Jesus heals this young man, casts out the demon, and the boy is immediately healed, physically, emotionally, mentally, and sends him on his way back to his family. And then as they're walking, it says this starting in verse 19 in Matthew 17, it says, afterwards, the disciples asked Jesus privately, hey, boss, why couldn't we do that? Why couldn't we cast out that demon? And Jesus says something that for many of us, maybe we have heard used as weaponizing language, but Jesus' tone in the original language is one of invitation. Okay? And so before I read, I just want to mention that. This is an invitation that Jesus is making to his followers. He says, you don't have enough faith. What he means by that is you are still growing. He's like, remember, a year ago, you didn't even think this was possible. You were catching fish. You were making tables. Matthew, who writes this down, you were on the other side of the law, working for the oppressors in the Roman government, taxing your own people. And now you're wondering why you can't work supernatural things? Give yourself a little bit of a break. But the invitation is there. It says you don't yet have enough faith. But I tell you the truth, if you even had faith as small as a mustard seed, as they're walking up a mountain, he says you could say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it would move. He says nothing would be impossible for you. And then in some translations, it continues with what we call verse 21. It says, but this only comes through prayer and fasting. That there is a readiness that Jesus is inviting his followers to do personally, internally, before they go out and do something externally. And that's the picture I want us to really lock in on about this passage, right? Is that there's a dependence that Jesus wants his followers to link into. That there's a posture of like, I can't, that's actually a great space to be in. And so they're coming back to Jesus going, man, we couldn't. Like, why couldn't we do it? They're getting hard on themselves. They're like, why? I must have messed up. I must have done something wrong. They're doing all the things that you and I do when we don't get what we want, right? They make it about them. And Jesus says, the reason that you couldn't do that is because your faith wasn't in God. Your faith was in yourself. And so there's an invitation to a posture of deep dependence, of internal spiritual fortitude that God is inviting us into. What do we do in private that anchors us to God long before we ask for fruit to show up in public? And I think this is a great invitation for us, especially as we close out this series on prayer, is that there are so many things that in the Christian ecosystem, right, the evangelical industrial complex invites people to pray publicly and make it a big thing. And I get that. And there's invitations to do that clearly in the scriptures, but it can also be manipulative and dangerous to only do that if that is not undergirded by as much, if not, I would argue, more of a deeper private prayer life where it is just you and God. And that your posture, that the position of your soul is living into whatever happens in public from a very grounded and connected place privately. And so as you think about this is exactly what happened in Moses' story. That he's having this private conversation with God that he records for us in Exodus, in his journal, right, about what he and God were talking about before he ever goes out in public and says, hey, people of God, this is what we're going to do. Like he's wrestling it out and making sure his heart with God is clear and honest and direct. So that when he leads the people and they're frustrated, when he leads the people and they're disobedient, when he leads the people and they just are people and leadership is difficult, right? He goes, hey, I'm grounded with God and I know that God is with me. And so I wonder for you and for me, in the spaces of our own prayer life, that we kind of lean into the same questions that Moses was asking. How is this going to happen? How do I make sure I don't look like an idiot for praying something? How do I not feel foolish for putting myself on the hook, maybe praying for something publicly or asking a friend into that place to pray for me? Showing my desire is a vulnerable thing. Like, that's honest. Let's just be human together about it. Like, why would I do that if God's not going to come through? Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever wondered, like, why would I say I'm trusting God for something and letting people know that I'm believing big for something? What if it never happens? What if I look foolish? I don't know about you. I've asked that question many times. And what happens is when that moment, when I feel that occurrence, it actually makes me want to shrink back what I'm willing to believe God for. Because all of a sudden, just like Moses and just like the first followers, my eyes and my faith has moved from will God provide in the ways that only God can to how will I make sure this happens because I want to look good. Like, that survival mechanism kicks in, and that's exactly what we see in both of these passages. And so what the like sneaky danger of that is that it can actually begin to erode the spaces that we're willing to trust God for. And what we see in this passage in Matthew, what Jesus is telling his first followers, and what we see in the passage in Exodus, in Moses' journal and his conversation with God, is this invitation to not get stuck on how it's going to happen, how can I guarantee the outcome, how can I make sure I look good for what I asked for, how do I, if I'm really honest, sometimes protect God's image to make sure that God is one that's seen as answering my prayers, because I would hate to pass along the information to anyone struggling in their faith that God may not come through for them, right? Like, all these things I can get in my head. I can get so stuck on the how and the details, and this is like, give me the process of how it's going to work out so I can guarantee the outcome. And God says, what if the purpose of prayer, what if the purpose of faith, what if the purpose of believing God for bigger things that I actually can't control is to actually create space in my story for wow? Like, what if the invitation from God to believe big things is to actually let your wow always be greater than your how? Because it can be difficult for me, if I'm honest, to try to get out of how mode. Like, it's just hard for me. It's hard for me to get out of how mode because I love to figure things out. Anybody else? Like, one of my highest strengths finders is strategic, which is both a gift and a shadow curse, right? Because I will always try to figure things out. Son of an engineer, what can I say, right? Like, there's a way, we got to figure this out. And I can get so stuck in that. And at the end of a story where I figured out how to get through this, at the end of the story, if his story landed, well, this is what I did, and that's how I led the people, and we got to the promised land on time, ahead of schedule, and under budget, like, what would be the story that he would share? Well, this is how he did it. Here's the markup, here's the SOP, pass it along. You also can replicate this same story. And as I'm sharing this, as silly as that sounds, doesn't that sound so much of what the faith invitation often feels like in our story? Oh, if you just do this, if you just pray this way, if you follow these 6 steps to success, God will spiritually love you. Like, this is where we get so stuck, friends. And yet the invitation of Jesus is still to have a deepening space of dependence with God. And so he intentionally uses the analogy of a mustard seed, the smallest seed that they were around. Olives were bigger, oranges were bigger, all the things that grew on that hillside, most likely in Galilee at that time. Everything else was larger. And so he intentionally says, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, like, it doesn't take much. It's super tiny. You don't have to be this superstar. You don't have to be this spiritual giant. Just have the faith of a mustard seed and allow the wow of God coming through in your prayers to overshadow the how you can't seem to get past. Like, what are you asking God for that you don't know how to do on your own? You should have something on that list. I should have something on that list. Something I'm asking God for, believing God for, praying for, that I don't know how to do it, that that's actually good for my humanity. Whether that's in your marriage or in your relationships, in your finances or in your career, that posture actually invites and somewhat forces me out of myself and independence into interdependence with God, that I'm actually choosing to believe that God's way is the best way to build my life. That my wow is bigger than my how. And I promise you, if you shift that perspective, you will find many areas in your life. You will find moments this week that will illuminate if your faith is actually in God or if my faith or your faith is actually in myself. Is my faith in myself or my circumstances or my ability to figure it out, or is my faith actually in the invitation that God has for me to trust, to believe that God is with me, that God is for me, that God knows me by name, and more than anything I want from God, what I really need and what I hope to desire more and more is that I get more of God. I remember when we moved here to San Diego from Chicago, and as we left the church that we helped build and launch, my boss and Pastor Jeannie gave us this jar of mustard seeds. And it was a reflection of the belief of others in us. That she referenced this passage and she goes, hey, every single one of those mustard seeds is someone who believes in you. Someone who has faith with you, faith for you. Not faith in you, Kurt, or in you, Katie, but in God on your behalf. And this has sat in our office on one of our desks for the last 8.5 years. And there have been many moments that I have intentionally drew my attention to this, and there have been many moments where God, unbeknownst to me, made sure that this jar caught my eye. To say, remember, you don't have to figure this all out. You don't have to strategize your way through this. In fact, that's a really sucky story at the end of it, if you do. But what if there's an invitation to believe God, to know that other people are believing God with and for you, to move you through whatever it is that you're facing that feels bigger than you? That the goal is not to learn more information, to get smarter, to say it right, to feel better, but it's to stay open to the presence and the movement of God. And so this is the invitation that Jesus has for you, that big things always begin with small steps, that big adventures always begin with small decisions, that big movements of faith start as small as a mustard seed. And so I had the thought of what if on the way out we took one of these mustard seeds and gave it to each and every one of you, but you'd probably just lose it. And I really like these mustard seeds, so we didn't do that. But that said, I wonder, what is it for you that is a small thing that might feel as silly or as small or even as insignificant to you as a mustard seed that could actually move you in one step closer towards that big thing that God might be inviting you to, that big thing that you've been praying for a long time, that big thing that maybe you've stopped praying for because it's taken longer than you thought. And my hope and prayer is that through the scriptures, through the teaching of Jesus, and through the example of Moses, that you are inspired to maybe believe again, or to believe further, or to ask bigger, or to no longer settle for this is fine in your spiritual journey around whatever that thing is for you. That Jesus' invitation for all of us was not to do it ourselves. The invitation of Jesus to his followers to explore new levels of faith or new growth was not to shame them for not already possessing it, but to invite them into a posture of learning and applying what they know already for the good of others in their community, in their city, in their nation, and for the good of the movement of God around the world. And that is exactly what happened in order for you and I to be here today. that Matthew was willing to write down what might have felt embarrassing to him so that it could potentially, thousands of years later, thousands of miles away, impact and help you and me reading about his story. And so I'm so grateful to be a part of a community that desires to be empowering, and that the message that me or someone else gives isn't the only space that God is speaking, that the Spirit of God doesn't only communicate on stage through a Britney Spears microphone, right? That actually God is communicating to your heart right now, and that there's something that we can learn and grow from, even from each other this morning. And so I want to invite you, if you're willing, to engage with this idea for the next couple of minutes with maybe 2 or 3 folks that are sitting around you. If you have to move, that's fine. But to ask these questions, and whether you want to share personally or you just want to hear what others are sharing and pray for them, that is totally fine, however that fits for you. But to say, like, what is something that you are currently believing or praying for that feels big, that feels beyond you, that feels maybe out of your ability to control? And then what is one small thing that you can do to participate in the answer to that prayer? Oftentimes we can get so overwhelmed when we think about the big thing, we don't even know how to start or what to do to begin. But there might be one small thing that maybe by talking about it with someone, we can learn and get feedback and reflection from each other around maybe what's something that we can do. Maybe even just sharing it out loud to a friend or to someone that you just met even could be the thing that helps you to actually like put some weight on the bar and to begin to move in that direction towards the thing that has been dormant in your soul for so long. Even just sharing it out loud could be that step. So I want to invite you to take the next 2-3 minutes to find 2 or 3 people and to ask and answer these questions, discuss them together. What is something that you are praying for that feels big? And invite them to maybe believe and pray with you. And then what is one small thing that you can do to participate in moving towards the answer to that prayer that you have? So go ahead and turn to each other, chat for a little bit. I'm going to get off stage, and then I'll come back and wrap us up in just a few minutes. Well, I hope that those conversations are not only beautiful and meaningful, but that they actually can continue, because I think there's such power in being able to open up and to hold space for each other around what it is that we're believing God for. Because then all of a sudden the thing that feels big and weighty and heavy, perhaps even, gets a little bit lighter when it's 2 or 3 of you carrying that thing together, even if it's just through a short prayer and a short conversation. So thanks for engaging with that. We're going to continue to worship together and to kind of steep in what God wants to do in your soul through a couple different ways, through music and a space for prayer. That actually what you just experienced is available to you at any point in time in any relationship you're in, if you're willing, but also every time you're here on a Sunday, our prayer team is in the back willing to not only just pray for you from a spiritual perspective, but have that conversation with you, with God. That's actually what they're there for, is to take whatever feels big, whatever feels heavy, whatever feels exciting and celebratory or feels even crushing and like debilitating, to actually say, hey, you don't have to carry that alone. You brought it in here alone, perhaps. That's how it felt. But you can leave here today knowing that someone else is carrying that with you because they prayed with you, because you were willing to open it up and share. And just even chatting with the team this week, the things we've been able to pray for healings, for relational restoration, for provision with jobs, for spaces for people to have their anxiety lowered because they've been focusing on themselves instead of want to focus on God and focus on others, for breakthroughs in conflicts in families, to just praying for things that are happening around the world that are just making us feel nervous or scared, that we want to actually center and ground into patience and trust in God for those things. All of those things have been prayed for in the back right over there over the last few weeks. And it's just been so fun to not only see that elevate, but also to hear people come back a week or 2 later go, hey, I got that job, or the test came back and it looks clear and we're excited and we're celebrating. Thanks for praying. Whatever it has been, like that space is there. Not to get what you want, but to get more of God around the things that are going on in your life. And so if that is something that would be beneficial to you, our prayer team will be back. They would love to pray with you and for you. And then we're going to continue to sing together. So the words will be up on the screen, and I invite you to stand if you're able and sing along. But there's multiple ways we worship, and this is just one of them. But we're just so glad that you were here and that we get to go after those things with God together as a community. So let's stand together. Let's worship. Let's pray. Thanks for being here today at Restoration Church.